there's one area of my playing I feel least confident with and that I need to work on most. I don't know if you guys have these kind of blind spots that you consider in your own playing. For me, it's kind of bends, and I think there's a few reasons that I want to get into as to why I think bends are a little bit of a blind spot and a weaker part of my playing, which I'll get into after this intro. But I'm going to hopefully kind of try and solve some of these problems, or talk about how we can solve them, and also talk about ways that I'm going to kind of be trying to be mindful and practicing more over the coming kind of weeks. And maybe you guys can keep me accountable in the comments, but you know, some practical things that we can do to improve our bending. And basically I think quite a lot of this is about confidence. This channel is supported by TrueFire. TrueFire is an online library of lessons from some of my favourite players. There's thousands of lessons on there. You can use the promo code JNC40 to get 40% off of any of their courses. I've just caught myself doing it there, and I think I call it like a bashful bend. It's just the name that's come to mind there, where you're not really confident about whether it's going to be in tune or not. And that is the type of bend that ends up, I find, coming out sounding worse than maybe just a slightly overbent or underbent. The bashful bend. Maybe that's what we're trying to avoid, and we can avoid that through, you know, having familiarity with the guitar that we're playing and its bend feel, being confident or more confident that we can do this sort of thing, supporting the bend well, and having a clear end goal, being confident that the bends aren't going to just chuck our guitar out of tune. I think that's the way we can avoid bashful bends, maybe. First thing to say is that you probably want to be focusing on one guitar in particular when it comes to bends. Like, all guitars have a fairly unique bend feel, particularly if you've got like a Strat trem or some... Oh. As I say, each guitar, you know, if you're playing on a Les Paul, you know, different scale lengths have a different feel, different string gauges have a different feel, and different trems have a different feel. So you want to take a bit of time with each guitar to try and familiarise yourself with the feel of the guitar. If you're switching between guitars, stop saying guitars, so that you're starting to gain familiarity with that instrument. And TrueFire sponsor this channel, and I just wanted to check on TrueFire whether there was some stuff on bends. I searched bends, and of course there's a bunch of it. But in particular, in JeffMcErlain's Beginner Blues Rock Soloing, he has a really good primer on the kind of technique that most folks use to set up a bend, and he talks about bend technique being more like turning a doorknob or opening a jar than actually using your fingers. I thought that was a really key insight. JNC40 is the code you can use to get 40% off any course, including all of Jeff's stuff. Or you could grab the All Access Pass, and if you're going to do that, you can basically for the entire year jump in and out of all of the courses on there. I would use the code JNC100 to get $100 off their All Access Pass. But yeah, if you're looking to get into some more, pro-level insights into bends, then TrueFire, I think, is a really good place to do that. Maybe we could talk, I guess, first about how you might figure out how to calibrate your bends somewhat. So first of all, give yourself like a starting tone. I guess A might be a good key. I quite like sort of half-step bends. As my kind of safety bend. So those for me, I go for quite a lot. And those obviously have way less tension. I guess what is it about bends that I find tricky is it is definitely that thing about being familiar with the guitar, and also like the imperfect element of it where it's like I'm really wanting to be in tune, and it's quite easy to undershoot or overshoot what is tuning if you're not totally familiar with the guitar. So this is a Guthrie Govan thing. Where you hit the note that you're going to play before you play it. So if we're bending to the 12th fret B, from the 11th fret we play it before. Or even if we're going a whole step, we do the same thing. And get used to, I guess, maybe you deliberately try to overbend and deliberately underbend. Maybe you get a better idea of what the sweet spot is if you deliberately over or undershoot it. So let's go flat again. Let's overshoot. What if we wanted to do a bigger bend? So these are the sorts of things that I definitely wouldn't generally do. So that's a, two-tone bend. And why wouldn't I do that in general? There's two reasons. Firstly, I think I might over or undershoot. And then the other thing is that, well, more likely undershoot on that, but I feel like a lot of my guitars, if I go for a bend that's two tones, it's quite likely to pull the guitar out of tune. So it's a little bit not worth the risk sometimes. Do you know what I mean? Like if you're on a gig and you think, right, I'm going to go for a two-tone bend. Well, what if it pulls your guitar, out of tune, and then you've got to continue the rest of your solo before tuning, unless you can do it midway through. It's a little bit of a risk, right? Not only that, but you're putting way more tension on that string. You could potentially break that string if you're going for a bigger bend. That's one other thing that, I rarely break strings, but when I do, it's often during a bend. So you want to also, get comfortable bending on each string, because to get underneath the B string is quite a lot easier than getting underneath the E string, I find, because you can sort of dig, and whereas here you're kind of starting at the edge of a fretboard. So overshot there. That might be a really good thing to practice. Also remember, like the feeling, like up here it's easy to bend because you're in the middle of the string. Down here, because you're closer to the nut, it gets a bit more difficult. So maybe we could try that. Like that, right? So again, let's just do it slow and maybe try and get, when we're practicing the bend slowly, I've noticed that some of my buddies that are really good at bending like Jake, one thing that he does is kind of bends quite quickly. So even if we're practicing slowly, right, so that kind of idea. And what I'm also doing there is that I'm supporting behind the ring finger to get so all three fingers are on the string, so that I've got, I'm not trying to, you know, do it with just one finger. You're going to support behind the finger with the other fingers, and that way you've got more chance of playing with the right amount of tension or enough tension, yeah, that kind of thing. Another thing, I tend to, I think, dig in this way into the fretboard a little bit more than I need to for bends. And if you actually think about trying to move the string towards a target position, so just moving the string up and down across the fret, so instead of thinking about it as a down, in and up kind of thing, just think about literally trying to float the string without too much downward pressure. I think would be a really good idea, because I think we're all of us probably, or a lot of us, quite used to using more tension is required and more pressure. Think about releasing that pressure before the bend. And you might find that there's way less kind of tension required than you thought. Now, for me, here's one thing that I have noticed really, and basically this is a key aspect of my playing. Nearly all of my bends come off of the ring finger, so you might have a dominant finger that you like to bend with. Now that could be a crutch, that could be a benefit, but you probably also want to practice being able to bend with other fingers. So particularly you might want to have your dominant finger, but try and bend with your other fingers. And another thing, talking about, so I've got a dominant ring finger is where I normally bend with. I also tend to bend literally just up. For the E, B and G string, and then the D it's a bit of a weird one for me because I feel like I just normally wouldn't bend on that, to be honest, because it feels weird to me bending down. So for me particularly, most of my bends go literally up the fretboard, if that makes sense. So my strings go from here to here, and rarely do I do it. That feels less controlled to me. Another Guthrie thing which is really worth trying is chromatic bend. And so that was one went wrong. Try and get that separation and good intonation. And probably what you find when you first try this, you might be releasing too far. Like, that's a minor third bend, which is kind of tricky. Like, that's really hard, but the step, the whole step, half step, step. Like, that was really just dreadful. That's better. And then one other last thing to kind of talk about. The vibrato thing. So this is one area that I think people struggle with. I think the idea is really that your vibrato should be coming from your wrist, and then it's a little bit more natural to kind of get that shaky thing going on whilst you're bending. But the bend sort of feels quite close to, like, locked in. And you don't want to lose tension on the bend as you kind of shake. So it needs to, I think, for me, come from the wrist as much as anything else. And when you're feeling really in the flow of this, I really like the sound of, like, sliding into bends. So that sort of thing. So, just quick summary, I guess. Don't forget to try your bends from each finger. Do, think about playing with less pressure, you know, less pressure than is, you know, what you think, and try and do bends with like a lighter touch, and sometimes think about bending quicker and slower. And that, maybe that quick can be a good indicator of the mechanics of a good kind of bend. And these are bad bends now, so notice when you're badly calibrated. Just some ideas on bends, something that I personally feel that I need to be continuing to work on, because it's one of the most guitaristy guitar things that makes you sound like a guitarist. So yeah, that's just some ideas on bends. If you want to grab the backing track, I'll put it up for you guys on Patreon. It's just something I was feeling that I need to kind of focus on and remember to focus on. So don't switch guitars so much. Try your bends, you know, with a certain gauge string, and have maybe your own sort of like self-calibration things that you do to get yourself refocused back in on whether the bends are happening as you want them to or not, so that you don't just fall into this trap like I do of just not bending at all because you're not so confident with that particular guitar. I hope that's somewhat helpful video for some of you guys maybe. Cheers for stopping by.